Hello. Morning, everyone. How are you all doing? Okay. There's people in here I haven't seen for 10 years. It's amazing. Hello, everyone. If I don't know you, I look forward to getting to know you later. I'm going to start things off by talking a little bit about the present state, about where we are, but also a little bit about the past and a little bit about the future. Now, I think if anyone stands on stage and tells you that they're going to give you insights into things, the first question you should ask is where do those insights come from? One of my pet hates with our industry is there's a huge amount of opinion that kind of masquerades as fact, and I think it's really important to kind of ask questions about where insights that you're being told comes from. So by way of a little bit of an introduction to myself for those of you I don't know, and to also give you a bit of background as to where my insights come from, here are the sources. So first and foremost, I run a podcast on the future of recruitment. I'm publishing episode 156 this week. So I've done 156 interviews with thought leaders, practitioners, people around the industry about what they think about the current state of recruiting globally and what's going to happen next. So that that's obviously a great source of insight for me. I also consult with employers on recruitment innovation. There's a kind of sort of a selection of the clients I'm currently working with or I've recently worked with. And I do a lot of research as well. So published a book in collaboration with my good friend Mervyn Didden last year, all about what companies needed to do to attract and retain exceptional talent to their business. And the two of us have done a number of research reports this year for various companies, including one there that we did a couple of months ago for Kelly Services, where we interviewed 14,000 job seekers in 10 European countries. So lots of different sources of insights. So I just wanted to sort of do that up front to tell you where my, to tell you where I'm coming from in terms of some of the things that I'm gonna share. Now, my very first job in recruitment was in classified recruitment advertising sales for a newspaper, where we used to sell adverts like this. Well, maybe not quite like this, anyway. But and I think that's really interesting because I think from a job board perspective, that's obviously where job boards came from. The internet arrived, job boards came, they disrupted the newspaper market, and pretty much took what was going on in classified advertising and moved it online in a very, very text-based format. Now, in the last 10 to 15 years, everything's changed. This is just a little graphic about everything that's kind of sitting in your pocket in your phone. So what I want to talk about to start with is some of the aspects of what's changed and also the effect that's having on employers and what employers are looking for. Now, it's a slight tag team because Rich is talking about this a little bit later, but I'm going to kind of introduce some of the topics that I know he's going to cover. So first and foremost, as everyone knows, we're facing huge talent challenges and talent shortages right across Europe, in every country, in lots and lots of different sectors. So that's really shaping the way that people view the market and the way that people try and access the talent they need. Secondly, we are living in such a noisy world. We're living in a world of distraction. This is something that's been sort of circulating for a few years. Everything that happens on the internet in a minute. I found 2018's version. 266 hours of Netflix watched every minute. What else have we got? 25,000 GIFs sent by Messenger. Now, you wouldn't have had that on this chart 4 or 5 years ago. So it just shows you sometimes, some of the unexpected things that are taking up our time and distracting us. So that means from a digital perspective, actually getting the attention and reaching talent gets more and more difficult because we all have so many distractions. And if you're trying to reach someone on their mobile, you're sharing that screen space with everything else that they're doing on their mobile. And then the third part of it is just the incredible pace of change in technology. When I first started doing the sort of job that I've got now, 10, 15 years ago, I thought the pace of change was pretty quick then. I had no idea what was to come, and I think, as we all know, technology is moving far quicker than any of us can really keep up with at the moment. So that's really shaping the way the market's working, and the way that certainly the employers that I work with are looking at how they do their talent their talent acquisition. Now, I always like to go to the source of things to find out what's happening. And I attended a conference in India earlier in the year, which was a talent acquisition conference, and they opened it with a panel of CEOs from some of India's biggest companies, telling the recruiters in the room what they expected from talent acquisition in terms of moving their businesses forward. So I want to kind of replicate this a little bit for the podcast. So I managed to have a conversation with Craig Donaldson, who's the CEO of Metro Bank, and I asked him, what are you looking for from talent acquisition? What's your talent strategy within your business? And he said something that has been really reflected in so many conversations that I've had in the last 2 years. First and foremost, I want to recruit people who fit the culture of the organisation, people who will share our values and bring them to life as the organisation grows. So nothing there about skills or past performance are all of the things that we sort of traditionally think of from a recruitment perspective. And he goes on to talk about how he can train people with the right mindset, with the skills that they need. And this is, I think, something that I'm seeing in a lot of employers at the moment. It's impossible to recruit everyone. It's impossible to recruit for all the skills you need because work is changing so quickly. So getting people into the organisation with the right mindset who can then train themselves, or you can train, is kind of a key thing. And it's something we found when we were researching and writing the book. Lots of people said it to us. The exceptional talent they're looking for, people who are right for the role and right for the business, irrespective of their background, people who can grow into the role and mould it around their capabilities, hiring for what people can achieve in the future, not what they've achieved in the past. Now, the reason I'm talking about this is I think from a job board industry perspective, it's really important to think about, and we'll talk more about this a bit later, to think about how your products and services are actually filling this kind of need, because it's not really how we've traditionally thought about recruitment and why companies and how companies recruit people. So just a quick summary of some of the key issues that my clients have when I talk to them about talent acquisition, the things they're looking for from the suppliers that they work with. People who will help them effectively communicate their employer brands, people who will deliver them quality over quantity when it comes to applications, people who enable them to identify and nurture candidates for hard-to-fill vacancies, a process that might take months, if not years, how improving their candidate experience, reaching multiple target audiences, removing unconscious bias from the recruitment process, making sure they're recruiting people who actually are going to stay and add value to the business. Craig at Metro Bank, that was his second biggest thing. I also want people who are actually going to stay and add value to my business as a CEO. That makes perfect sense. And also, I think an issue for many employers is managing the expectations of their hiring managers internally, who essentially may be looking for talent that doesn't exist, or talent that doesn't want to come and work at their business for whatever reason. So because of that, I think we're looking at a very, very different process when it comes to talent acquisition. So if we kind of sort of rewound to, I don't know, I picked an arbitrary date, I picked 2003, it could be 2008, it could be 2010. This is kind of how the process sort of works at the moment, or the process works. You put a job advert somewhere on a job board, someone applies through the job board directly to the employer, or you put a job advert somewhere, traffic sent to the employer's career site, and then someone applies that way. Now, that doesn't serve the needs of employers at the moment and what they're really looking for. So I've been working with a number of employers on this as a model instead. And I just want to talk about it quickly, because I think it might be useful to understand a bit more about it. So attention, persuasion, conversion, and experience. So attention I've already alluded to it. We live in an incredibly noisy world. And, for the last few years, we've talked about talent attraction, attracting people to your business. And I don't believe you can attract people to your business unless you get their attention first. So, how do you get the attention of the talent that you need? Once you've got that attention, how do you actually persuade them that your organisation is right for them, but also the job is right for them as well? And I think this is something that lots of people struggle with, in terms of actually selling their organisation and selling the job, and thinking about how they can do that. Because, lots of people don't want to change, don't want to move jobs, or don't know about the company that's approaching them. So it's a kind of a critical thing. And I think that this is something recruiters do naturally, face-to-face on a one-to-one basis, but I think that lots of companies struggle to do this at scale, or struggle to use technology to do this. Then it's conversion. How do you convert that hard-won interest into an actual application? And I think if we look at the current state of career sites, corporate career sites, this is a problem through that channel. So actually converting quality interest is an issue. And then finally, the experience that you give people. How do you give people a great experience through the whole process? Going back to Craig at Metro Bank, this was one of the other things that he said. He wanted to make sure that everyone who went through their recruitment process had a fantastic experience, so that they would be advocates for his growing bank, basically, even if they were unsuccessful in applying. So, critically important. So, what are the implications? What are the implications of this? And I've sort of picked out four that I think will be of interest to you guys. The first one is targeting. People want precision targeting. They want to be able to precisely target the talent that they're looking for, but also precisely target their budgets. How can we reach the audience that we need in a very cost-effective way with no wastage? And I think that's a really interesting issue. I see people turning to all kinds of sort of cost per click and programmatic methodologies to do that. I know that's something that Rich will talk about a little bit later, and it's interesting to see that kind of emerging as a way of solving that problem. Content marketing is just a massive thing, and by content marketing, I really mean storytelling. So how can employers tell the story about their brand, about their company, and about their role? And lots of people are really thinking about how they can do this. And to tell a story, you have to create an emotional engagement with someone for them to listen. So, if we just look at this is the first page of Facebook's career site to recruit people to work at Facebook. And you can see it doesn't say anything about Facebook. It doesn't say anything about any of the roles that are available. It's a real kind of emotional appeal to say, come and work for us and do the most meaningful work of your career. So this sense of storytelling that creates a connection is really, really important. And I think we need to sort of take a hard look at what's on offer in the industry, and text-based job descriptions can't really do this, or don't really do this at the moment. So it's something to kind of consider, which comes onto formats. Huge use of pictures, huge use of videos. I found this online, actually. This is a kind of a reworked traditional job posting, if you like, in a much more interesting, much more visual way. And I think that whole aspect of the formats that people can get their message across, is absolutely critical, and what people are looking for at the moment. I pulled this one off the Yodel careers site. Yodel, which is a delivery company, and I really like this video, not because I want to become a self-employed courier, but I thought this video put across the story about why people want to be a self-employed courier for this company really, really well. This guy tells his story. He's retired. He got a bit bored. He wanted to do something to fill his time to meet people, so he did this job. And it's it's a great example of storytelling to persuade people that this might be a role for them. And it speaks massively more to people than just reading text that describes that job. Seeing some really sophisticated storytelling going on now at sort of various stages of the recruitment funnel, principally via video. These are examples from a company called HubSpot. Many of you, I'm sure, will be familiar with HubSpot. It's a kind of a marketing automation technology platform. This is from their recruitment team. Their recruitment team really focusing on the same kind of principles that sit behind HubSpot software in terms of how they can attract people. And what they do is they constantly analyze their recruitment funnel. They say, their biggest demand is for salespeople, like many tech companies. So they look at who's in their pipeline, who's reaching out to us, who's at what interview stage, where's our funnel getting stuck, where have we got the blockages. As they described it to me, where are we not telling our story effectively enough? And what they then do is they create content to help push people through that, whatever stage they might be in the funnel. And at the moment, their format of choice is Facebook Live. So they will do sort of Facebook Live chats, then record them and have them on their career site. But all of their content is designed to solve a specific recruitment issue that they're having at that point, which I think is an example of the sort of really sophisticated approach that many more employers will be taking over the coming years. The next one's all about data. One of my favourite examples of using data in recruitment comes from Philips. If you get these slides afterwards, if you click on this link, you can actually go through to a podcast interview with Alan, who is their global talent acquisition lead, and he set up this talent intelligence division within Philips. And in the interview, they talk about how they use data as part of their recruitment process. And it's absolutely fascinating. They're mapping out their competitors. They're working out where which parts of their employer brand are going to appeal to people who work at which competitor, and doing huge amounts of data modeling, around where the best places to recruit are, what companies to acquire, where to open offices. And I think we'll see more and more of this data-driven approach to talent acquisition. So I'd recommend listening to Alan sort of talk about it, because he'll do it a lot better than I could. And then the final part of this is the actual experience. Now, a couple of examples here of companies who are using technology to improve their recruitment experience. They're both student recruitment examples, Unilever and KPMG, who've radically overhauled their recruitment process for students based on using technology. So things like mobile assessments, video interviewing, lots and lots of automation to actually make the candidate experience better. So they're not necessarily doing it to make their recruitment process more efficient. They're doing it to give the candidates a better experience. So using automation technology to make it easier for the students to apply and easier for them to get feedback. Now, when it comes to experience, I had a really interesting example the other day. Because to me, the candidate experience starts at the very, very first touch point in the job seeking process. So I was working with a hotel chain, and we're just doing some work around their career site and what happens when people Google them. So we did a search on Google for, I think it was waiting staff in the area that they worked with, and they were overjoyed that a number of their jobs came up via job boards they were using who'd integrated with Google for Jobs. So initial euphoria, oh my God, when people search for our jobs, we're coming up. Soon soon that faded away to utter disappointment because they realised that there were jobs there that were no longer available. Their brands were confused. There was a job advertised in one location that actually was in another location. And this was all through sort of various feeds and job boards that they were working with. And it was kind of magnifying that inaccurate information, and that was the first impression that people had when people Googled them. So based on that, they decided to double down and improve their career site so they could get their jobs in directly, because they were very worried about the experience that people were having at that first touch point with that very confusing picture. So I use that example because it kind of really underlines the importance of what you guys do in terms of creating that very first impression for these companies. So. Sort of finish off the insight section. I just want to talk about some of the, some of the tech trends, that I'm seeing, things that I think are kind of worth watching, and the effects some of them are having or not having on the recruitment process. This is always really difficult to do, talking about recruitment technology, cutting through the noise, which is like a toddler playing the drums sometimes in terms of, in terms of what's actually going on with recruitment technology. But I've kind of identified a few trends that I think are most interesting. The first one is obviously artificial intelligence, AI, machine learning, something I know that is dear to the hearts of probably most of the people in the room. And I think at the moment, unfortunately, the debate around AI seems to have kind of fallen to the level of almost pantomime. So, it will replace recruiters. It won't replace recruiters. It will replace recruiters. Oh, no, it won't. Oh, yes, it will. So I think that it's kind of a shame that a lot of the discussion around artificial intelligence at the moment isn't actually about the value of what it does. It's this very sort of polarized argument about whether it's going to replace recruiters' jobs. And I think it's there's some fascinating developments going on there. But really, I would kind of urge anyone who has technology in this space to really think about how you communicate the genuine value of it and what it actually is and what it actually does. I did a podcast interview with Rob, who some of you may know, who's the AI program lead for PwC. And this was a great interview where he talked about what he's seeing in artificial intelligence at the moment, what actually is possible and what's likely to be possible at the moment. And there's some great stuff in there about its implications for jobs as a whole. So, I think his take on the topic, I think is really, really interesting as a neutral who's kind of observing what's going on. The next one is blockchain. We've been talking about AI for the last sort of 2 or 3 years. The next 2 or 3 years, everyone's going to be talking about blockchain, which is going to confuse absolutely everyone. I'm seeing, I don't know who these guys are, whether they're in the room or whether they still exist or whatever. But I'm seeing, quite a few, job board startups sort of, integrating with blockchain technology. It's normally based around cryptocurrencies and some kind of reward-based system. And I think that's really interesting. We'll see how that develops. But really, for me, the most interesting parts around blockchain aren't the cryptocurrency parts. It's the parts about validating identities and how that might work. And I'm already seeing a number of employers looking at how they can integrate blockchain into the way they do learning and development to validate learnings and things that people have done. So I think there's some really interesting. This is going to be a really interesting space for us. I'm not quite sure exactly what it'll look like and whether it looks like this or whether it looks completely different. But I think that whole idea of being able to confirm and certify someone's identity and perhaps their qualifications is really, really interesting. Again, I'm not plugging PwC here. It just happened to I happened to speak to this guy. I've got another podcast interview with PwC's Director of Blockchain and FinTech. And in the interview, he talks about what he sees the implications of blockchain being for HR and recruiting. So again, completely neutral. He's not in the industry. And I think he's got some, it's a fantastic interview because he really gets to the value of it. And I think a lot of conversations about blockchain get caught up in how blockchain works. rather than talking about the value it brings. And it reminds me a little bit about talking to people about online recruitment in the 1990s or the late 1990s, where we all had these great presentations with 5 slides about the mechanical workings of the internet and the history of it and what it was. We don't talk about that anymore. We just talk about the value of it. So I thought that was really interesting in terms of how he talks about blockchain. However, the 2 things that are of most interest to me that I think are potentially revolutionary. The first one is voice. So I don't know if you saw in that Internet Minute slide that I had up all those slides ago. One of the things that happens in the Internet Minute, 67 new voice-enabled voice-first devices are shipped somewhere in the world. This is almost stealth growth. These are appearing in people's homes. They're becoming part of people's lives, and we're not really talking about it that much. So, I think very soon, and I know that a number of you are already experimenting with aspects of this, but we're not far away from lots of people defaulting to Alexa, find me a job. How does that work? How does the plumbing behind that work? What's the opportunity for the industry there in terms of delivering an excellent voice-based experience to people when it comes to job hunting? So, what really underlined this for me was I've got a 3-year-old son. When he was 2, he started using an iPad. He learned to use it scarily quickly in a way that terrified me. I bought an Echo Dot. It took him months to get working on his iPad. I bought an Echo Dot for the front room. Asked it to do a couple of things. Went out of the room, came back, and my 3-year-old was having a conversation with it, and managed to get it to play the theme tune to Peppa Pig in Spanish. Still don't know how he did it, and he still talks to. His default thing is to talk to Alexa, and it just showed me how quickly people can learn to use these things, and they can become part of what we do. So, voice is really my top tip. I think there'll be some really interesting stuff in there. Also, I think we've got this kind of sleeping giant of virtual reality, augmented reality. This has been kicking around for years and years and years. We see it in recruitment quite a lot, normally at careers fairs where someone like the army sets up a stall where you can wear a headset and drive a tank and all that kind of stuff. But slowly but surely, the technology is becoming cheaper. It's started to get mass adoption. It's becoming smaller. We're seeing things creeping into the mobiles in our pockets. So if anyone has the latest iPhone and they've not discovered the augmented reality ruler tape measure yet, I would have a look at it because it's absolutely mind-boggling. But I think this again could be really interesting for recruiting and talent acquisition and storytelling purposes. I think we can only go as fast as the technology becomes mass market, and that's obviously taking quite a long time. But there's some really interesting sort of moves recently that's really kind of accelerating the uptake of it. So final section. It's kind of about the future, and it's really some thoughts about how the job board industry can stay relevant in these times of great change. Now, the first thing to say, I think for about the last 10 years, people like me, not me, but people like me, have been standing on stage telling people that the job board industry is dying, it's all over because social media is here or something else is here and all that kind of stuff. Now, it's blatantly obvious, looking around the room, that the job board industry isn't dying. It's still thriving, it's growing, it's consolidating, it's changing. However, I would always take careful note of this quote. A horse is here to stay, but the automobile is only a novelty, a fad. Investment advice given to Henry Ford's lawyer in 1903. Now, the thing about this statement is 50% of it is 100% correct because we still have horses, and horses are still used. But obviously, the automobile wasn't a fad, and it's very much, changed the way that transport works. So I always think it's interesting. So I think it's we'll always have job boards and a need for job boards, and the service that you guys give to employers is always will always be valued in some way, shape, or form. But I think that there is a big opportunity here to be in the broader conversation and to be more than I think that if you kind of isolate yourself in your industry, there's a chance that you're kind of going to be sort of seen as very transactional rather than a strategic part of talent acquisition. So I think it's really worth sort of thinking about that and thinking about how you can display sort of thought leadership and innovation. So I put together a few thoughts on that. First and foremost, I think it's really important, and I'd say this to any aspect of the recruitment technology market, to speak the same language as employers. A lot of the work that I do seems to be translation work, where my clients can't understand what their tech or their ad tech suppliers are actually saying to them, because it's not really in the language that sits within the problems that they have and the language that they use. So really understanding the way that employers speak about talent acquisition, I think, is critical. I know that many of you already do that, but it's kind of always worth pointing out again. Sell products that solve real problems. People want to tell stories. They want to tell stories through video. They want to tell stories through pictures. They want mobile-first approaches. They want targeted places where they can reach targeted clients and target their budget. So, thinking about that and developing products that do that, I think, is absolutely critical. The third one, demonstrating thought leadership and cutting through the noise. There is as I said before, there's a huge amount of noise in this space at the moment. If you look at some of the recruitment marketing platforms that are out there and getting funding, and some of the new breed ATSs that are out there and getting funding, they are making a tremendous impact by making a lot of noise. I was at Smart Recruiters event in Berlin a couple of weeks ago. It was a great event. They were showing thought leadership. They were doing all of this great stuff. There's a huge amount of sort of competing noise around the industry, and I think that there's an opportunity for the job board industry to kind of really be up there in terms of driving thought leadership and cutting through that noise, because you're an industry that's been around for decades rather than an industry that's been around for 6 months, 2 years, 5 years, 1 week, because I'm sure someone's invented some kind of new recruitment technology while I've been talking to you. Rich is going to talk about this again, but it's also about unleashing your data. I think one of the most interesting aspects of your industry is the sheer amount of data that you have about how job seeking and recruitment works. Now, I know that many of you, publish this data and use it in strategic ways, but I think, it's about doing more than stuff that's just, headline-grabbing PR. I don't know whether Tuesday afternoon is still the most popular time to look for a job, but, that's a lot of the stuff that I see coming out. Employers want data to sort of use strategically. So I think that there's an opportunity to use data to cement thought leadership. There's also an opportunity to use data as a product, because employers are really looking for the kind of insights that you guys have to help them plan, to help them be better at recruiting. And finally, it's about being part of the conversation. I think I alluded to this already. It's about talking strategically with the employers. A lot of employers that I work with, whilst they see job boards as important, they see job boards as a kind of a transactional, kind of everyday thing that they do, and that kind of sits in the corner of their strategy. And it really should be something that they're thinking about first and engaging with you guys first on. So I think being part of that employer conversation is absolutely critical. That's everything I had to say. I hope that was useful. I have no idea how we're doing for time. If there's time for questions, I'm happy to answer them.